Alright guys, TacticalRab here again today. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far with the World Championship done and dusted. Rostermania is back on the menu. The Esports World Cup is happening in a couple of weeks' time. Rumour has it the roster lock is today to get rosters sorted. Will the top teams decide to make any moves as a result of this? But some teams on the field most certainly will be. We've got roster updates today all across the board, to be honest. Big list of free agents as well. Which of these top teams, though, that might be considering moves will just leave it to the World Cup and then decide what they want to do with their roster for Black Ops 6? Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new, as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty, of course, to get into. Thought it was great to see the 3 rings, by the way, that Clay brought out on the desk yesterday. Sensational stuff. We also had, of course, the other rings that were produced for the old school national championship champions, right? Because before the actual world championship came to be in 2013, there were years of national championships which were effectively, the best team in the world would win. Doug said Martin was talking for a bit of time about kind of, recognizing those players, and I thought it was great, the likes of Moho, for example, with an absolutely beautiful, Fear Moho is legendary in Call of Duty history, but way back in the day, 2008 national champions. Let's talk about last night though, because it was entertaining. There was obviously a couple of after parties happening. The OpTic boys were. This particular one, Kenny, I think, turned up a bit later. Here's, of course, AG having a good time. Scott was there. Shotzzy was there. The drinks were flowing. The conversations are flowing. And, of course, potential roster stuff happens at these type of places, right? You get players talking to other players or whatever the case may be. Who knows really what they're talking about. Scott was there as well. It was kind of cool because I didn't really see exactly what the other Toronto guys did. I'm sure some of them were still there or something. But, the Toronto Major, for example, all the Toronto boys were there. But, they weren't there in the championship Sunday, whereas it wasn't the case this time around. But Scrap was still there, and they brought out this Scrap 2025 is what this says, world champion. So maybe next year is the one for Scrap, right? Because of course, second last year, third this year. You gotta think that he's gonna go one better and win the ring at some point or another. And honestly, where is Scrappy now in the conversation of, let's just say, current players that have not won a championship ring? I think for some time it was Octane and Kenny, before they won a couple of years ago, were considered to be effectively the best players in the league with no world championship. But when they got their rings, that kind of passed over really to Dashy, right, as being probably the best player never to have won a ring. Now that's happened. So in terms of all-time players, you're still looking at the likes of Zuma and Enable and these players that never won a COD Champs ring. But in terms of current competing players, Scrappy's got to be up there now. He's only been around a couple of seasons, but just how good he's been the last couple of seasons compared to his peers around him. If you look at the top players in the league, you're looking at HyDra, Simp, Shotzzy, and, the OpTic guys, the FaZe guys, whatever. They've won championships. Scrappy has not. But to be fair, you're also probably looking at the likes of CleanX as well. Basically, a lot of that Toronto team, I would say, fall into that category right now. This was interesting to note as well, though, because I've given a lot of credit, and I think for good reason, to the coaching staff over at the Subliners, what they've done with their roster over the last couple of years to have the success they have done, despite maybe it not being, expected that they would be as good as they actually have been in some regards. But ReeaL, I think, has been a key part of that. However, he does an interesting thread of tweets yesterday saying, huge thanks to the amazing team, heartbreaking to lose, I'm proud of the growth that we've had throughout the process, throughout the season. It's been tough, but to win a major and nearly go back-to-back, nothing to discredit. And give a shout out to Sender, to Matt Fisher, who's their kind of performance coach, and basically implying that he doesn't really know what's next. Bit of a sentimental one. Huge thank you to everyone at Subliners. My first ever opportunity. I'm heavily indebted to FaZe, who's the top guy over there, for your unwavering belief, trust and love. It's sad that we couldn't end the legacy with a chip. Sad it's going away, he says. So, what exactly is going on here? I didn't talk to Javid this weekend really to get the lowdown on whether he's going to continue or whether things are just changing at the Subliners. I guess maybe he means the conversion over to Cloud9 or whatever. Is there going to be some kind of consequences there? Or maybe there's more changes behind the scenes that we are kind of yet to see, but I would be surprised for sure if, ReeaL parts ways with the organisation after all they've been able to achieve. Quickly on FaZe, just because the speculation will continue on what this team might potentially do. As I say, the issue is that the roster lock, it seems, for the World Cup is basically today. So unless FaZe have already made a move in the last 48 hours, then they probably will have to turn up to the World Cup with their current roster, even if they might not necessarily get along so well, right? This is the kind of question, is that the FaZe situation this year, there was, from various angles, there's been talk about friction behind the scenes on some level. And sometimes winning can kind of paper over some cracks. When you're no longer winning, things can quickly start to fall apart. I think for FaZe, though, they'll have to think about, well, if we just replace Drazah again and we get another 4th in, surely now they have to recognize that is not going to be the solution, because they've tried it multiple times and every time they come to the same conclusion. So, you know, that's why there's further questions about a potential even 2-man change. Priestahh's looking for an EWC opportunity as well. Of course, he was on Boston. Now that's no longer the case. They have their new roster now, of course, and therefore for the guys like Priestahh, it's like there isn't really much opportunity to get to play the World Cup. The players really want to play it, and we're going to discuss that actually with the Minnesota Rocker here in a couple of seconds, because a few interesting things to make on that, because the Esports World Cup announcement should start very shortly indeed. Jake Hale says the Boston Breach roster is signed, and that roster is meant to be Cammy, Awakening, Purge and Snoopy. That's the rumoured roster of 4 for the Boston team that's going to go to the World Cup. The problem is, for the Challenger side, is that that was a team of 4 without Snoopy, but with ProLoot instead. They just came 2nd place on it, Brooklyn. They lost a Game 7 on the main stage to Arstie's team. But they are effectively going to be in the league, basically as their entire team. It's simply minus ProLoot plus Snoopy. But the interesting thing is that ProLoot was arguably their best performer of the event, and he's getting royally screwed over here, and I think it's actually really unfair, and we'll discuss why literally right about now. So because that team of 4 that qualified for the World Cup is effectively no longer existing, right? 3 of those guys are going into the Boston team, so that team of 4 doesn't really exist any longer. Therefore, they've decided that instead of inviting that team, they're going to invite the next seed down, which is the Houston Spartans. Sparkfire, Hamza and Wiz are going to go instead. Now, this is highly controversial, right? Because if you're ProLoot, you're just getting screwed over here. Like, your teammates are leaving to a Pro League team who are going to be there at the World Cup. You are not going with them, so you don't get the opportunity to build another team around you for the World Cup. You're simply told, all right, you aren't invited anymore, we're getting the next guy, which I think the better solution would have been to allow ProLoot to form another team around him that would be able to attend. But, you know, to me that feels the fairest, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. The other drama, really, is that how do you choose the next team? I actually mentioned this briefly when I was on Ben's watch party, or like the pre-show, whatever, just before the Sunday, is that there are 4 teams, because Gorillas aren't going, right? There are 4 teams from the top 4 of this Challengers World Championship that are going to be going to the World Cup, in addition to Team Falcons, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, over the coming days. But because this team, therefore, wasn't making it, they had to go down the list to the 5th seed at this most recent event. But the issue is there wasn't a 5th place team. There was a 5th and 6th, right? You don't have 5th place, you have 5th and 6th, top 6. Then you have 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. So Journey's team, they were also top 6, so they were effectively tied based on, you know, with the Houston Spartans, but I think they didn't make it based on pro points and therefore seeding. And therefore Journey's making the argument, they're like, hey, well, we came top 6 here, but Houston Spartans are going instead of us just because of pro points. We actually won more maps or whatever than they did, so maybe we should have been 5th, or just have a playoff. This is what I would have suggested, to say, okay, if ProLoot's team can't go because there's drama or whatever, the players are leaving, then what they should have done this weekend is preempted this and said, okay, we're going to have a 5th place playoff, just to make sure that if this eventuality happens, we will be able to resolve it. I think this is a problem they could have predicted coming, because everyone knew what was happening here with these guys on that Omit Brooklyn team going to Boston, but, well, seemingly it wasn't executed as maybe it should have been. But the roster lock is meant to be today, and this, as Jake Held points out, I think is a very telling comment, really, because I know that there is stuff like this going on. I'm sure there is. CDL players looking at their teammates, knowing the World Cup roster lock is today, but they want to drop them, and this is the thing. I am sure there are going to be some teams going to the World Cup that are going to be dysfunctional teams that don't necessarily get along with each other especially well, but you know, they're kind of forced to play because they haven't had a chance to actually make changes yet based on when the roster lock is. That may not apply, however, for the teams that didn't make the World Championship, because they've had a good couple of weeks to figure out their roster, and this is what the Minnesota Rocker are going to do. We heard rumours that Estriel and DiamondCon are coming in because Gorillas are chalked, you know, they're not going to the World Cup. They might not be in the league next season is kind of the implication of that, I guess I would argue. But they are set to join Lins and Accuracy. initially the team that was rumoured, right, was Accuracy on the, off the team with Gunless there instead. And especially given that Accuracy was, doing some coaching for OpTic, then, there's been questions on his future. Will he return? Will he become a full-time coach? Because if Accuracy wants to walk into a coaching job, whether OpTic offer him on a full-time basis or whether he goes elsewhere, Accuracy can walk into a coaching job basically anywhere he likes, I'm convinced, if that's what he wants to do. If he wants to play, there's a good chance he can get another team again. My read on this is maybe that Accuracy thinks, all right, well, why don't I come back and play for the World Cup for $1.8 million, and then after that I can decide what my future's going to be. But, so this is the team of 4. I wouldn't expect this to be the team of 4 they go into next season with, but this is going to be their team of 4 for the World Cup, and to be honest, I kind of like it. I mean, Estriel and Lins, I like that as a sub-duo. Accuracy DiamondCon, I think, has got its questions, but, apparently this is like a temporary team, and they will continue exploring options, but yeah, this is meant to be the team of 4, Lins, Lamar, Estriel, and DiamondCon, and I think there's a decent chance that this may end up being a slightly more functional team than we see from some of these other rosters that are going to go here to the World Cup. And of course, Estriel actually talks about this, right? And he says, tough way to end the year. Thanks Vios, of course, the coach over there, for taking a chance. Appreciate the support, onto the future, right? So implications that, yeah, it's coming soon, potentially, this announcement here. Also, this from Beans, effectively confirming that he's signed the contract. Now, the rumour has it this might be with Ravens. There were rumours that Beans had trialled with them, so they were potentially going to go for a TJ, Gwyn, Fellow and Beans team, which I actually do rather like. I think with Clay and Fellow, you probably only need one of those two. You can argue whether you keep Clay, whether you keep Felony, whatever. But, the idea of Beans coming in here to play with Felony, I think is actually kind of a nice idea. So that's a rumour anyway, that Beans potentially has joined the Ravens. But, in some ways it could be a bit of a blessing in disguise for some of the teams that didn't make champs, because at least they've had a bit of time to figure out what they're trying to do with their roster and potentially form a more competitive team as a result of it. So, yeah, these are your free agents though, by the way. And it's not like there's any crazy free agents on here that you think, wow, this guy, you've got to get him. Technically, Dashy is on here, but, I mean, okay, realistically, OpTic aren't going to make a move after winning champs. So, let's say you're FaZe, you're looking down this list and you're thinking, it's not exactly, there's no crazy player that stands out to get. But of course, if you are FaZe, buyouts aren't a problem, theoretically, because that player will more than likely be interested in leaving, and therefore the likes of Ghosty or, maybe even HyDra or Scrappy or whatever the case is. Obviously, Slasher should also probably be on a list like this as well, because he's going to be making the return for the new season. But that's how Rostermania stands right now. So it's tricky to say how much is going to happen before the World Cup and how much the World Cup is going to dictate this, because we've got a bit of Rostermania going on now. I'm sure there'll be more discussion on what's happening behind the scenes. The teams are going to go to the World Cup and either get slammed or have a bit of a comeback, and whatever happens there, that's really going to determine what happens after that, going into what's probably going to be the big Rostermania at that point. So I don't think it's easy to say, as of this present moment, exactly how many of our 12 CDL teams are going to change. We can be very sure that one of them isn't, and we can be very sure that, well, at least the teams that didn't make the World Championship are going to be. But outside of that, it's still probably all to play for. But very much interested to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.